Hi, I'm Scott at ediblemusic.com. When I'm working with you and helping you learn how to mix better, I find often that one of the things that makes mixing feel more difficult for you is if you haven't begun from the best position as you could. Maybe the project overall is disorganized and kind of messy, or the sounds that you've chosen aren't quite there yet. The levels are all over the place. But if you optimize your project from the very beginning, it can make the mixing process much more efficient. I'm going to go into those steps here about how to do that, but I want you to know that I've also compressed them down into a checklist so that you can utilize it as you're getting started on your mixes. Download that at ediblemusic.com/startup. You can print it out, use it as a PDF and mark it up. Keep a project log, use it to start your mixes in a way that is efficient every time and avoids the problems of a messy, unwieldy project. Because without those problems, mixing can become a lot more fun. I made it for you. Pick it up at ediblemusic.com/startup. I'm going to use an example here as I go into the details about how to do this. And you'll notice that it is indeed very disorganized. And so if your question is sometimes, well, where do I begin with a mix? How do I begin with a mix? That answer is not easily found when a project has no organization. So I want to show you some steps to organize your project. The first thing we'll do is to save it under a new file name. This will be called mix. And if you're working on your own song that you've made, this will help you to distinguish between the different stages of writing and composition, production and recording, mixing, and then mastering. I think that it will help you a lot if you have separate project files for the writing stage, for the recording and production stage, and then now for the mixing stage as well, and name them as such. That way, you don't have to worry too much about whether or not you're going to lose a take. Even if it's not turned on in the project, you won't lose it. You'll be safe. But this also helps you to get a fresh start as you begin to mix, because you don't want to have any of the lingering issues that might be going on in the previous steps, such as in this project, for example, there are a couple of organs, but there's only supposed to be one organ part, and there are a couple of bass parts. One is a scratch bass, one is the finished bass. I guess that is announced by putting it in all caps. But things like that, there's not a lot of clarity about the project. So using a new project name, saving it with a new file, helps you to get a fresh start, to remove the hats that you were wearing during the writing and recording stages, and to put on your mixing hat so that you don't have to have those lingering thoughts from those previous stages going on. The next thing that you should do is to remove all of the unused tracks. There are a lot here because this song was developed in the same project. The song changed a lot as it was being written and recorded. But now all of these, none of these are needed except for the tracks that are on. So I'm going to delete all of those. Already it's a lot more manageable, right? If you get rid of the things that are not actually going to be contributing to the mix, even if they feel very precious, because you've saved things in a new file name, they're not gone forever. You can always go back to that previous file if you need to. But it's important to help your brain to be able to focus on the things that you need in order to make your mixing process a lot more efficient and a little bit faster too. So now we've narrowed it down, and there's only about 8 to 10 tracks or so. There's a few background vocals in here. The next thing that you'll want to do is to organize things consistently in all of your mixes by groups. So usually what a lot of us will do when we're starting a mix, we'll have the drums at the top, Then we'll have the bass and some instruments, and then the vocals at the bottom. Or if you're going left to right, then it would go in that order from left to right. I'll show you in both visual examples here. So here it's only about 8 tracks. 2 of them are for percussion. So you can group them that way too. I always like to color my drums red. Since it's not an enormous project, I'm just going to leave these on their own tracks. But if you have a large project, then do the same thing. Group your guitars into the same group, your keyboards or your synths into the same group, so that when you were to collapse everything, it helps not only visually to be able to distinguish between which tracks belong to which part of the program, but it also helps you to figure out some of the routing that we'll go into in a little bit as well. But in this case, it's a small enough song. There's some percussion, there is a brass synth, an organ, another synthesizer, a bass guitar, and then a bunch of vocals. That's pretty much it. What you saw at the very beginning is very different from what the actual song is. With all of those files all over the place, it doesn't help to give you a sense of what the song is meant to do. Now, what I would suggest for you to do is to continue your color coding and rename everything. Pull the bass next to the drums. The bass will be blue. These are vocals here, so they will be yellow. We'll do the background vocals a bit of a paler yellow. And you should rename everything. That percussion is just a little beep, so I'll leave that as such. These can all remain kind of purpley pinky. So now you can see visually as well. The red is a distinct part of the program. The blue is a distinct musical part of the program, as are the pinks and the purples and the yellows. So as you're mixing in the next steps, as you go forward, if you need to work on the vocals, you don't need to scroll around and look for where it is, because if in every one of your projects you color the vocals the same way, then you will be able to look out for it a lot faster. And if you're mixing in a window that includes the waveforms, I would recommend to make the clips and the track colors the same. So I'll do that here. And just highlight all of them. There. Pretty good. And what I like to do next is to turn all the tracks off so that I can have a sense of how loud they are without really listening to them, because I don't want to tire my ears out, especially in case the track levels are all over the place. One might be really loud all of a sudden and it will scare me, and I don't want that to happen. So what I'm looking for is to get the tracks at an RMS level of about -18, maybe up to -12. And that way, let's just zero these all out. So that's pretty good. The organ peaks at around -12 or so there as well. Adjusting the gain settings like this without even hearing it might sound a little bit strange at first, because you want to be able to hear things as you're mixing them. But remember, we're just getting started. So all we're trying to do is to optimize the project in a way that will help out the actual mixing steps a little bit further down the road. So if you have all the tracks at around somewhere between -12 or -18 in their average level, then that helps you out to get the most resolution possible from the fader as you're pulling things down and getting a broader balance among all of the tracks. This is just to get you into the ballpark so that you have a good starting point when you do make the volume adjustments that you need to, or the gain adjustments that you need to in a few steps down the road. You may also want to think about signal flow and routing. Because you have grouped all the tracks that are like one another together and color coded them, one thing that I like to do is to have those groups also be sent to group buses, one for the drums and percussion, one for the instruments, and another for the vocals. In this case, I probably won't do that, but if your project is large enough, then it's nice to be able to process groups all together and then balance those groups with the other groups. I think that you can get a much easier handle on how to layer a mix if you are thinking about it, not only in terms of drums and other percussion individually, but if you get the drums and all the percussion balanced together, and if you get all the instruments balanced together, then it's more a matter of just getting these two broader sections to gel together as well, and then the vocals can sit on top of them. It simplifies things a lot more so that you don't have to adjust one track at a time all over the place, and it can help you, or it can make you feel more confused than you need to be. In this case, again, this is a rather simple project, so I don't really need to do that, but I'll show you the process that you would take anyhow. So this will be our drums. And I'll usually give these all kind of the same color, something kind of dark. And then I would send the instruments to those groups. These may all go to the instruments, and then the vocals may go to the vocals. So it's going from individual tracks to group buses, and then eventually it'll go through the master track. But as you're mixing, if you need to make some quick adjustments just to the instruments, then you can do that just using the fader on that overall group bus. And then as you can see, the audio from those group buses will go to the master. You may also want to set up routing for return channels, like if you want to have some parallel compression or some delay or some reverb going on. You don't need to worry too much about what the parameters and settings will be on those yet, but if you have the channels set up, then by the time you do, you can just get right to it and you don't need to worry about it. Because we're still in an organizational mode here, it helps to take care of all of that up front so that the mixing process can be a little bit more creative and a little bit more fun that way. For now, I'll just set up a couple. Set up 3. Maybe one can be parallel compression, another for reverb, and another for delay. Let's specify. There. And I'll usually color my return tracks the same as what is sending to them. So the drums are red, so the parallel drum compression will also be red. Same for the vocals, those will be yellow. I'll make my master track a different color there. Prismatic, all colors heading into one. Using these steps will help you to focus your attention more on the mixing process as you're going, rather than having to scroll around and try to recall and remember what is on an actual track because it doesn't belong to a particular group or it hasn't been assigned a particular name or color. And then routing things makes things a lot more easier for those later steps down the road as well. So I want you to make sure that every time you're mixing, you go through these steps before you even start. Remember, I didn't even open up any of the audio yet because I want to save my ears for when I'm actually doing something more creative. I don't think it's helpful to have the audio playing over and over again on a loop while you're doing this organizational work, because then by the time you start mixing, your ears will just be kind of tired, right? If you do these steps before you get started on every mix, use the checklist that I made at ediblemusic.com/startup and use it to help develop a habit, because once you do and you complete all of these steps before you actually start mixing, it will make the actual mixing process much more efficient and creative and a lot less stressful as well. Try it out.